What's up everyone, I'm Twisted. Nora is Wild Rift's first exclusive champion, but she's also the first character to be adapted from LoR to one of Riot's MOBAs, at least the first whose cards aren't based on her past. Wild Rift turned her into an artillery mage. Instead of summoning friends with her portals, she uses them to summon a variety of projectiles and even CC her enemies. This playstyle was unexpected, but I think it worked really well for Nora, and this had me thinking, what if other characters from LoR also got the same treatment? And so that's the topic of this video. I'll go over 3 different characters from LoR and see how they could be adapted to League PC or Wild Rift. I tried to pick characters that could bring something unique to League, be it in terms of visual design, thematic or gameplay. For this video I didn't come up with actual abilities for these characters. Instead I'll be going over their potential roles, classes and general playstyle. But feel free to leave a comment down below with your ideas on specific abilities these characters could have in-game.
Bilgewater's lawless, but bounties pay.
When discussing LoR characters that could become League champions, Lariette is definitely not a popular pick, but personally I think she could be very cool. Lariette grew up in Demacia where she developed her ironclad sense of justice, but Demacia became too boring for her, so she moved to Bilgewater to fight crime over there. She became a vigilante, taking on the targets from the city's bounty board, dedicating her life cleaning up the streets of Bilgewater and making a name for herself, or at least die trying. In her artwork we can see her riding a seahorse and using a lasso to apprehend criminals. League already has mounted champions like Xolaani, and it already has champions that can mount and unmount like Kled and Rel. But one thing all of these champions have in common is that they are all melee. Lariette on the other hand could use her lasso and maybe even the rifle from this concept art and be your first mounted ranged champion.
The chase begins.
In terms of design, she could also be your first real cowboy champion. Sure, we have Graves and Twisted Fate, but I mean a real cowboy. One that rides a horse and doesn't shoot a giant shotgun. A champion that wouldn't make sense to get a High Noon skin, you know? I think she should have a mechanic similar to Kindred or Rengar's passive, where she has to defeat specific targets. But while Kindred and Rengar's are more themed around them being hunters, Lariette should be themed around her taking on bounties.
You're all over the bounty board.
So in a sense maybe Action's W is a better comparison, or even Garen's old passive. Maybe enemies who kill her allies or take objectives should be marked as her next bounty. She would then be incentivized to seek them and kill them, gaining some kind of buff or stat as well as extra gold. And for this I think it makes the most sense for her to be a mid laner or a jungler, since these are the most incentivized to roam and help out other lanes. I also think it would be funny if she could apprehend enemies with her lasso and drag them around like in Red Dead Redemption. It would also work as a nod to her effect in LoR.
Lasso 'em.
Here are some items I imagine would be good on her, but again I'm not really coming up with abilities, so don't take this part too seriously. I imagine her leaning more towards a bruiser than a squishy marksman, mostly because we also don't have many champions like that who are ranged. Also just for fun, here are some skin lines I think would fit her well. Project is a given, she would look awesome with cybernetics and a robot horse, Odyssey because space cowboys are always cool, and Crime City because this could subvert her fantasy and turn her from a crime fighting vigilante into the henchman of a crime boss.
Peace through servitude.
Now let's talk about Xolaani, probably the LoR character most people want to see in League, and for good reason. Xolaani was once a Shurima Ascended, but when the Empire fell she was driven to madness like her brothers and sisters, and so with them she waged war across Runeterra. This was before she was eventually defeated by Zaun, sealed inside her weapons and hidden in Ionia. In LoR we see a potential future where the restored Wuju find the weapon and decide to safeguard it. Kayn attempts to steal it, killing many of the Wuju students, which led one of them, June, to seek Xolaani's weapon. What June didn't know is that Xolaani had lured her to the weapons so that she could take over her body. Xolaani would later return to Shurima where she managed to defeat the Aspect of Justice, the mother of Kayle and Morgana, and take over her body as well. Now people online will tell you that Xolaani must be a bruiser or an assassin, but those people are fools because the role that most fits Xolaani is actually support. And here's why. There are already 5 Darkin in the game and not a single one of them was designed as a support. Zaun was almost our first Darkin support, but the team felt like the parallels to Shin in his kit were better suited for a top laner. One of the ideas they had was to allow him to corrupt allies, turning them into Darkin and giving them long-lasting effects. And I think this idea would fit Xolaani very well. You see, the main reason I think Xolaani should be a support is that before the Darkin War, she was a gifted healer, using her hemomancy powers to help people. But as the traumas began to pile up, from the fights with the Void and the fall of Shurima, she began to use her powers in a different way. She went from using them to heal, to using them to corrupt and control. She was so tired of all the death around her that she decided this was the only way to prevent the ones she cared about from dying. She now uses her powers to take control of people, subjugating them to her will.
Speak my truth, Tarosh.
Peace through servitude.
And this isn't like Viego's powers, where he can influence people and make them join his side. Xolaani doesn't control your mind, she controls your body. You are aware of everything she makes you do, you just can't stop yourself from doing it. Now in League, this can be translated as an ability that prevents an ally from dying. Something like Renata's W or the ultimates of Zillion, Taric or Kayle, which are all supportive abilities.
They will never die, because I will never let them.
But regardless, she should be able to heal allies because that's what she's all about, healing others, even if now it's in a twisted, messed up way.
Life is precious. It must be protected.
I think Xolaani should be our first melee AD enchanter. I imagine her playing like a mix of Senna, Renata and Taric. But why AD? Well, every single Darkin in the game builds AD, except Varus sometimes. And yes, I know Vladimir uses blood magic and he builds AP, but Sion and Briar are also AD, so I think thematically AD just fits Xolaani better. But most importantly, there are only 2 champions in the game designed to be AD supports, so a new one would certainly bring something new to the role. And being both melee and an enchanter is also something rare in League. We really only have Taric, so this would also be Xolaani's niche. I can see her having some mechanic related to lifesteal/omnivamp, it fits her team and lore, and even the item in League based on her weapons gives omnivamp. Maybe she could give these to allies, or maybe she herself can heal allies based on the heal she gets from her own attacks. Something similar to Sword of Blossoming Dawn from Aram Mayhem could also work. And the idea of corrupting allies that was originally for Zaun also fits Xolaani quite well. This could come in the form of a buff that grows throughout the game the more Xolaani uses her abilities on allies. Slaying units is also a big part of her game plan in LoR, so I can see this buff also becoming stronger on allies that last hit minions or get takedowns. And here are some items I think could work on her. Items that give both AD but also some utility, as well as more standard support items. For skins, I think something from the Eclipse universe would be really cool for her, either Coven or Old God, or even a skin tied to the Eclipse Order itself. Arclight or Dawnbringer would also be nice because these teams are really different from her base aesthetic. And finally Snow Moon. We already got champions as Blood Moon Demons, but we could use some more as Snow Moon Demons. And Xolaani could be a parallel to Aatrox in this skin line. Hey, if you're watching this video, you are probably not subscribed. If you are enjoying it so far, please consider doing so. It's free and you can always change your mind later.
You're about to hear the last best sound of your lives!
And to end this video, let's talk about Scratch. Scratch, who might or not be canon after Arcane, is a music star from Zaun. We don't know much about her besides this though. She plays a guitar, her prosthetic leg is also an amp, and her face card is a microphone. League is slowly getting rid of champions with physical disabilities, so having a new one with a prosthetic leg would be really nice. She was designed to contrast Seraphine, so she has a much more punk aesthetic compared to Seraphine's pop star look. This is something we don't see much in League outside of skins. I think the gameplay of Sera and Scratch should also contrast in some way. For example, if Seraphine is a champion that wants to keep some distance from the enemy, maybe Scratch should excel at close range instead. Seraphine has a couple supportive abilities, so Scratch should be a bit more selfish and more focused on damage. So far there's only one champion that uses an instrument as a weapon, so Scratch would be a nice addition from that perspective. And fighting using a guitar automatically makes your character cool. Think of Dante from DMC3, Aino from Guilty Gear, Chai from Hi-Fi Rush, or Serval from Honkai Star Rail. In one of her voice lines, she literally calls a guitar an axe.
My soul's in this axe and I'm dying to let it roar!
So I can see her swinging it to perform various melee attacks. Here's a couple examples from the games I mentioned. But let's be honest, a guitar is meant to be played. In LoR, Scratch's ability deals damage to all enemies. She's literally reaching out to everyone in front of her with her music.
Make sure they hear you!
Some of her abilities should see her playing her guitar and creating AoE projectiles or electric sparks to damage multiple opponents. Neven from DMC3 again being a very good example of this, as Dante can play it to create several different projectiles that deal damage in an area. Again, AoE is the name of the game here, it just fits her super well. For the electric part, Serval is probably a better example, as she can summon lightning strikes using her guitar. I think this playstyle makes her suited for the mid lane, which works nicely since Seraphine was also designed for mid, but it would be cool if she could also be played bot, because let's be real, Seraphine is basically just a support now. I think her and Sera should have one of those Easter egg quests when playing against each other and when playing together. And did you know that Seraphine plays music when allies are near her, and this is audible to the Seraphine player but also to nearby players? Well, I think if Scratch is near Sera, her music should change as if they are collabing with each other. I wasn't sure if she should be AD or AP, but it's been a while since we got an AP melee burst champion, with the last one being Salas in 2019, so I went with AP. For skins, I think the most obvious would be something from Musicverse, but that's too easy, so instead why don't we give her a Space Groove skin, changing her punk aesthetic to something completely different. Another cool idea is Soul Fighter. The games I showed as inspiration are all Japanese, or at least inspired by Japanese media, so it's no wonder that this skin line would fit her so well. And finally, why not Psyops? We haven't seen this skin line in a while, and I think the military aesthetic would look cool on her. Instead of sound waves and sparks, she could have those weird psychedelic effects. And this concludes this video. Let me know down below your thoughts on my ideas, if you like them, or if you got ideas of your own on how to adapt these characters to League. And let me know if you enjoy this type of video, because I would love to do another one and go over even more LoR characters. Feel free to suggest some in the comments. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, it's free and you can always change your mind later. I'm Twisted, and I'll see you guys in the next video.